Welcome to the Why Dad podcast. We are your hosts, Paul Wandry and Andrew Stopelstead, and we are on a mission to figure out what it means to be a man, a husband, and a father, why it matters, and how to be the best that we can be. Not only the best that we can be, but the ones that our family needs, and deserves. And today, to help us along that journey, we have a very important conversation, which we'll be holding with Mick Wienholt to talk about fatherhood that begins with loss. Mick and his wife lost their firstborn, Luke, at full term, and that experience reshaped everything about how Mick understands being a dad, a husband, and a man. And this isn't a story about moving on or tying things up neatly. It's about what grief forms in you, how it changes the way you show up at home, and what it means to carry fatherhood forward when it doesn't look the way you expected. So if you're ever if you're a dad who's felt loss, fear, or the weight of responsibility, this one's for you. Mick, welcome to the show.
Hey, boys. Thanks a bunch for having me. Appreciate
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yes. Thanks for coming on to the show. As we were saying before, we've been looking forward to this. And, I do want to take a moment to honor Luke. I know that those who are taken from us early can so easily be forgotten and overlooked, but they leave a big imprint on our lives and those around us. So we appreciate Luke and his story and you willing to share it with us.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Thanks, guys. Glad to be here to do that.
So one question we've been liking to ask our guests at the beginning of the show is, what is the most dad thing you've done this week?
Just this week. Wow. Man, I wish I had like a diaper change or something that I could point to. But my guys just turned, we have identical twin boys, and they just turned 7. And
Happy birthday.
East Coast, and we've gotten major ice, and everything has been delayed. So we just got one of their presents, and it was one of those indoor like arcade basketball setups, where it's like the dueling basketball hoops. And so I spent 2 hours this afternoon putting that together with IKEA-like instructions. And the hilarity is that they're like, use this one bolt that is, no exaggeration, 27 millimeters long. And then other bolts are 29 millimeters long. And I'm like, come on. You know what I mean? I'm sharp. It wasn't a problem, but I'm like, we could make this a lot easier, people.
Yeah. Boy. Yeah. Yeah. I think that's kind of like a christening as a father. It's like you're not a real father until you've battled with some sort of instruction manual, putting together a toy or some such for your kids. So
right.
Exactly.
And I'm sure that wasn't your first.
Let me just add very quickly to that, though. The thing that I'm actually more excited about as it relates to your question is when we gave them the gift and had them start playing with it. My wife and I immediately started talking with them about the fact that this is brand new for you, so you're not going to be good at it, because they have this expectation of like, oh, I should be the best basketball player ever. And it's like, that's impossible because you don't have practice. And then the other thing that we had to communicate to them was, this is a blessing to you. And if you guys create a bunch of conflict with it, and it therefore becomes not a blessing, then it's going to go away. And they know we're not messing around.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the difference between, being intentional as a parent and just like, okay, do your thing.
Right.
And it's going to produce very different results because, if you're not preparing your kids for that, then the inevitable happens and they're not ready for it. You guys aren't ready for it, or you are, but you're not, like you have the sons and they're not meeting them. So it just creates strife. But so that's awesome. I love that, you're taking that approach. And, I feel like it's those little moments. It's just like one to two sentences, to convey that meaning or whatever, or maybe it's 5 minutes, but it makes a huge difference.
Yeah.
Now
It's
I know
interesting
why
that
I was just going to crack a joke, but now I know why, as an uncle, the toys I give my nephews are never around.
Nice. Yeah, there you go. Well, Andrew, I was just going to add to, Paul, I was just going to add to what you were saying there, in that one of the things that became very clear to me with our daughter, who was our first living child, was that if I did a little bit of correction, a lot, and it was exhausting, but if I did that, then I didn't have these major meltdowns and like major needs for, what's the word? Like, like these full-blown episodes of needing to parent. It was just kind of like these tiny little corrections, and it wasn't helicopter parenting, because that's like you don't give your kid any space at all. But this was more of like, I'm going to give you gentle nudges and corrections
Right.
consistently. That way I'm not having to, like, change the course of your life at 14
Right.
because I didn't pay attention until then.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like I don't know. It's like the same with anything. Like I don't know, studying for a test. Like if you study progressively over the few weeks leading up to the test, you're going to be way better prepared than if you just cram, everything last minute before. Like
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
and in parenting, there's no cramming. Like cramming is not going to happen, So
Yeah.
it's those habits, building those habits.
Yeah. And dude, listen, I know this is your show, brother, and I know you've got some places that you're going to take us. I just want to tack on this one idea because you talked about in the opening, right? This is also about being a man. This is about being a father. This is about being a husband. And one of the distinctions that I have seen in my life is the thing, not the only, but one of the things that has me behave as a man versus when I was an overgrown child are decisions. And so I made the decision to parent in that way that we were just talking about, and then followed through on the decision. And to your point about studying, it's a wonderful analogy. Do you know what I did in college? Not proactively studying, right? I didn't make that grown-up adult decision. Instead, I just crammed. And that's a big distinction that I've seen in my life, that when I make a decision and I commit to the decision that I've made, that my behavior and therefore the habits that are formed as a result of that, they begin to shape me and then the people that I interact with as well.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think the difference is kind of like just letting yourself go with the flow of life, and you're just like
Mm-hmm.
letting the tide take you, or you're making those decisions and you're taking that oar stroke one stroke at a time,
Right.
and those are the intentional decisions you're making to get where you want to go. Whereas like before, we're just drifting. Oh, we're
Mm-hmm.
just letting life throw us around.
Yeah.
And it's funny you mentioned, the shift between a grown adult child versus like a true man. Like, I feel like I didn't make that shift until, the past 5 years, and I'm in my
Mm-hmm.
30s. So like it's
Yeah, man, I can relate, brother.
but that's like one of the reasons why I want us to be having these types of conversations is
Right.
so that we can raise our kids. I think I heard you talking about this in a different episode, but raising them to be adults,
Mm-hmm.
so that they're actually, men and women when they're kids, as opposed to the reverse.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, man. Well said, right? Imagine what we three could have been at 19 had we been men, so to speak, right?
Right.
Versus, at least I'll speak for myself. Although, Paul, you did mention, yours was not at 19. Your transition wasn't at 19 either, right? Andrew, maybe you were already there, but yeah,
No,
100%
that's
get
why
it,
I'm
man.
on this podcast. I'm still figuring it out as a single guy. And I'm just gaining knowledge from, guys like you who are where I want to be.
Yeah. So yeah, no, I've loved this little tangent, and thank you to our listeners for dealing. By now we go on these tangents all the time, and it's all relevant, right?
It is.
But speaking of like kind of that journey of as an individual and kind of bringing the conversation back to Luke. So let's say, what was your, like, who were you as a man at that point?
Yeah, wonderful question, brother. The best way for me to describe that is I was a 6 foot tall, athletic, overgrown child that was fueled by ego and Red Bull. That's really it. I was
Can
doing my
relate.
best to climb the corporate ladder.
Mhm.
I'd been in a, we'll call it a career type of job for a number of years at that point, because I'm 31 at this point in my life. And, all that mattered was me. I hate to say that, but that's and at the time I can tell you that I would not have had that clarity. I would have said, "Man, I do all this stuff for my wife, like I'm trying to create a life for us as a family, even though it's just the two of us now and it's going to be growing, especially because we're pregnant, all this other stuff, and look at all the adventure we've had and all that type of thing." But in the end, it was really just self-gratification. So no question, overgrown child, 6 foot tall. The state calls me a man. I was the farthest thing from.
Yeah. Yeah. I think many of us fathers and those who hope to be fathers someday can relate with that. So kind of like following that same line of thought. So you're the 6 foot tall child. It's life is about you. What did you assume fatherhood would look like?
Yeah, dude, for sure. I assumed it was going to start with healthy kids. My wife and I were both healthy. We just figured that this is going to be as we had planned. In the back of our heads, we didn't believe that pregnancy and living children was automatic because my sister had had a stillbirth a decade before Luke was a full-term stillbirth. But on the whole, we absolutely were like, things will just go as planned. Because up to that point in life, things had basically gone as planned as well. Like we were married without kids on purpose for 5-ish plus years. And then we decided, and I'm choosing my words here like explicitly and on purpose, we decided now we're going to start a family. And I say it that way because that's really, most people I think that, certainly like we did, but it's like, that's not automatic. We know lots of people that want kids that can't have kids. And yet, and we also now have a perspective where we look at children as a gift from God, but we didn't at the time,
Right.
So we're just like, oh yeah, now it's time. We're going to do it. And then just along that same lines, we got pregnant, guys, almost immediate. So, we pull the goalie and it's like, boop, we're pregnant. Like, okay, well, this is kind of like what we planned. You know what I mean? So it was just like one thing after another. And then it all changed on January 4th, 2012.
Yeah. Yeah. So, you're expecting a healthy child and you are, I imagine, can you put us in your shoes, like emotionally? Like, I think most of us can guess at how you were feeling before, but like, let's put us in Mick's shoes emotionally, like right
Yeah,
before, due dates any day.
absolutely. Yeah. I'll kind of give you the arc, if you will, of how all that stuff went down. As mentioned, I'm 31, climbing the corporate ladder. We get pregnant. First time we're pregnant. So I go to the first handful of OB appointments. And then because I'm climbing the corporate ladder, I don't go to any of the ones in the second trimester. And I remember going to the last one and I said to the OB, I was like, look, it seems like everything's kind of going well, going fine, but you're the expert. I'm not. Is there anything that we should be thinking of, be aware of? And she said, because I will definitely not forget this. She said, no, man, you guys are all good. Your wife should be on the cover of Fit Pregnancy magazine.
Wow.
Yeah. Wow. Exactly. And the reason why I have not forgotten that is because it was a stroke to my ego. I'm telling you guys this now, not with pride, but back then it was prideful. I'm like, dude, that's crazy. Like the implications there, just so that we're all clear, are that your baby's okay, your wife is fit and healthy and attractive enough to be on the cover of a magazine.
Right.
Okay. So it was a total stroke to my ego. And then inside of probably 10 days, I don't remember exactly when that appointment was, but inside of 10 days, more than likely, I come back from walking our dogs and my wife is standing in our kitchen and she says to me, I haven't felt him move since last night. So we go to the hospital, we go to labor and delivery, not to the ER, and we're in this little side room. We got 3 different ultrasound techs, 3 different ultrasound machines, and then finally they bring in an MD to tell us what at that point we all knew, which was, I'm sorry to tell you this, but your baby no longer has a heartbeat. And up to that point in my life, right, everything's gone to plan. In big, broad brushstrokes, right? Okay, there's plenty of challenges through life. But as it relates to those challenges, I had not met a challenge that I couldn't, with some degree of tenacity, some degree of grit, some degree of additional learning or coaching from someone, or maybe a few dollars, right? And some DIY, and like figure it out and get through it. Like I could do
Right.
all kinds of stuff around the house. I could fix the car. I was successful at work. They put me into leadership positions to improve outcomes, right? And in that room at that moment, I realized this is beyond me. There was no way I could fix the problem of my dead son in my wife's belly. So let me just keep going a tiny little bit more.
Yeah.
My wife is freaking out, understandably so. We're both overwhelmed by the grief. I mean, this is just incredibly challenging with what's happening. She says, I need to go to the bathroom. So I said, all right, I'll accompany you to the bathroom. We leave this tiny little room. It wasn't like a big labor and delivery room. Like this was almost like what almost seemed like a repurposed closet. Like it was a tight, tiny room.
Mm-hmm.
Walk a couple of steps down the hallway. You got to remember, she's 39 weeks at this point. I mean, this is a week away from Luke's due date. So I help her down the corridor and help her into the bathroom. And it's one of those giant room bathrooms. Like you can just park a dump truck in it, but it's got just this literally like one toilet. And I close the door and I'm now in the hallway and she's on the toilet. And I am physically overwhelmed by the emotion of grief. So I end up down on my knees because there is a heaviness, like there is a pressing, like a crushing, overwhelming feeling from the emotion of grief. And that's what's put me now on the floor on my knees.
Mm-hmm.
And that is where I cried out to God, because I had known about God. I believed in God all of my life because I'd been raised in Christian education, but I had, just so that we are clear, no interest in God, no relationship with him. And it wasn't an ignorant or a passivity. It was I want nothing to do with him. He can stay, because I believe he exists. He can stay up there and he can keep his rules and everything that he has away from me and let me just do my thing. Okay.
Yeah.
That is where I'm at emotionally and spiritually, rolling into life as a 31-year-old, and on my knees in that hallway and knowing from the moments before in the room that it was beyond me, no way to solve this problem on my own. That is when I surrendered, because I got to the end of myself and I cried out to this God that I knew about but didn't have any relationship with. And that is when everything began to change.
That's powerful. I have no other words. Like,
Praise God, man. All glory
yeah.
be to him, because it
Amen.
could have gone a lot differently. And it was his grace that had it go the way it did, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
So at this point, you're feeling, I think every person in that situation would feel as far as the grief goes. You realize that, you're kind of at your wit's end and you reach out to God. But at this point, Luke has not yet been delivered. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah.
And I believe that, well, did your wife still have to go through natural delivery?
Yeah. So it's really wise of the medical professionals to do the inducing process. But man, my wife is like, man, get him out of me. Let's do a
Yeah.
C-section. Like, get him out of me.
Yeah.
And I mean, dude, I don't have a leg to stand on with that. You know what I mean? You can't reason with that. Fortunately, the medical professionals did. And they were like, look, the standard of care here is that we will induce you and you will deliver. And so she did. And so that took many, many, many hours for all of that medication to eventually work its way in for what turned out to then be a very, very challenging delivery physically for my wife, because it went from 3 centimeters dilated to 10 and like delivered in like 35 or 40 minutes. Like it was really, really rough for her. But then it was all over, because it was all a natural delivery without any medication. And what was incredibly painful physically shifted now fully to something that was just incredibly painful emotionally. And we spent 24 hours with Luke. That was the timeline that they provided to us. And we took every literal nanosecond of that.
Yeah.
And just soaked it in. We
Yeah.
invited our closest friends to the hospital. And I get a big kick out of this because we needed some levity. I'm not a comedian by any stretch, but I enjoy levity at the right moments. And so some really close family friends of ours, because all of our family lived on the East Coast, and all of this story that we're talking about is actually occurring in Colorado.
Okay.
So we're 1,800 miles away from family. There's no like, oh, I'll be there in 20 minutes,
Right.
My sister, who had had the stillbirth a decade before, when she got the news, she said, I'll be there in a couple of hours. And we were like, no, 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 no. We're good. We're adults. We'll work this out. She goes, I'll see you in a couple of hours. And quite literally, she got on the next flight, and she was in essence an angel. She was my sister, and she was in human condition, but man, she was sent from heaven. Like, it was incredible
Yeah.
how helpful she was. This, we invited, our kind of best friends, best family friends in, and, they're very somber. It's late at night. I open the door to the hospital room when they knock, and I was like, don't worry, you can't wake him up. And I laughed, right? And it wasn't a disrespectful type of thing. It was just
Right.
like, hey guys, look, we're here together to
Mhm.
experience Luke, and we're going to show you our super handsome son, and I'm super proud of him, and that's kind of the best I got right now. So like,
Right.
let's
Yeah.
just all enjoy this moment instead of all being like super somber, because guess what? I've been crying my eyeballs out for the last 6 hours until you guys
Yeah.
got here,
Yeah.
and when you leave, I'll be crying my eyeballs out too,
Yeah.
Mhm.
What was there any, I mean, this entire journey, like the entire process, like from finding out or like the first glimmer of, okay, something's wrong, to I'm sure you had multiple texts trying to find the heartbeat, and you're like, no, there's no heartbeat to be found, but they have to do it because it's process, to your wife going through that grueling delivery, just and knowing that like our baby's dead.
Mhm.
And so you've just gone through the grinder, and then Lucas delivered an upheaval of emotions. Like, was there any reticence to look at him, to hold him, any of that?
No, man, I wanted to just be with him. It was awesome. He didn't need a diaper, right? Because he's not pooping and peeing. And I asked
Hmm.
the nurses, I was like, can we get a diaper? And it wasn't because we were going to cover him up. We were going to swaddle him anyway. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? But I was like, I want to do the diaper change. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
I want to put him in his first diaper. And then we had the nurses teach us how to do the swaddle that they do. I'm like, this wasn't delusional. Let me be very clear about that. I'm not
Right.
like 20 minutes from now, he's going to warm up and you know what I mean? Like, no, it's nothing like that. But it was like, man, this is our son. And I even remember walking out of the room. So now we're in labor delivery at this point, right? Or maybe we're in a recovery room. It probably all went down in the same room at that point. But I remember leaving the room briefly and, within eye shot and not that many feet from the door of our room is the nurse's station. You know what I mean? And they're sitting behind the counter and they got all their computers and all that stuff. And this woman looks up at me and we kind of lock eyes. And I said to her with this huge smile on my face, I was like, my son's in there, because I was still this proud father, even though he was dead, and I mean, we've been crying,
Yeah.
and we got really good at crying, man. I'm a pro crier, like I am a professional, and yet I was still so proud, and I've never seen his eyes, I've never heard him cry, and he's changed my life.
Mhm.
And for those that are probably wondering, I'm just going to add a little bit of levity here. Yes, even though we are not huge Star Wars fans, there were plenty of times where even when he was in utero and still alive, I did say to him, Luke, I am your father. Okay. I was like, I want this
Good.
kid to know that.
Right.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for walking us through that. And um, I know like that's such a challenging journey, and and it's also one that unfortunately is not unique to y'all. And I know that you, like you mentioned, your sister and her child, and how were there was even the charity that came to the hospital and took pictures of Luke, to kind of to memorialize him, and they did this for other early losses. Like, unfortunately, this isn't unique. And the reason why I'm mentioning this is because I know that there are dads listening to this who have gone through either a stillbirth or early to mid pregnancy loss or even shortly after, and they've had to navigate the same thing. And I appreciate you sharing the story because I know knowing what others have gone through and knowing that, you know, you don't, it's not something you move past, but you move forward with it. And I appreciate how you are framing it as like, Luke is still your son. He was taken away from
100%.
you, but he's still your son. You're still his dad. So talk to me a bit about that. Like like how did you see yourself as Luke's father after that? And how did that change who you were as an individual?
Well, I spent a significant chunk of 2012 grieving. So, yeah, I mean, I'm in this awkward spot of I'm fully a dad. I don't get to raise my son, you know. But admittedly, we didn't dwell too much on that because we just didn't have an opportunity to. Like the
Mhm.
grief in and of itself just sort of overwhelms you. And so my focus became more on grieving and healing for myself and grieving and healing with slash for and supporting my wife in her grief and in her healing. Even though I wasn't raising my son, I did have a large shift. Okay. So just so that everybody, we kind of alluded to it, I think thus far, I have living children subsequent to Luke. So I have the direct experience of knowing that when you have a living child, life changes dramatically. Okay. And so this shift away from self was 60 to 80% of that, like, living child scenario, because it was, a focus now on my wife, togetherness, healing for her, healing for me, grieving, those types of things. And we did that all in the midst of a relationship that was now formed with God through Jesus. And God showed us that what I thought was this Luke-shaped hole in my heart was actually a God-shaped hole in our heart. And he filled that, and he loved us through all of the grief
Mhm.
and literally changed our lives. Like he changed our lives, changed the trajectory of our lives forever and that of our subsequent children.
That's just amazing. I have literally no words because it's just a powerful realization, and like and it's one you came to. It's like how awesome is that? Like, what other word is there that through all of that you've found like what belongs in that spot now, and how that's carried you through to now, to where you are sitting right now with us and talking about this. It's beautiful. That's a better word.
Yeah. Praise God. Andrew, it's continued to play itself out. Okay, I'll
Mhm.
give you a quick example of that. Oh, my relationship with God is now 14 years on because we're recording here in 2026. And so get in guys groups or just groups in general with other guys. I remember this one guy was talking about having a verse, a family verse. And I was like, well, how did you pick yours? And he's just like, you'll know. And I'm like, that is so not what I was looking for. Like, can you give me the 3 or 5 steps that I need in order to figure
Right.
this out? Because I'm interested and I'm a guy that likes to accomplish things. And I now believe that we have that. And the verse is Ephesians 2:10. And Ephesians 2:10, in paraphrase, is that we are created, we are God's handiwork. Okay. Some call it a masterpiece. Some translations call it a masterpiece. We're God's handiwork created in Christ Jesus to do good works, which God has prepared in advance for us to do. Okay. And we're now more than a decade beyond Luke's death. And that verse really helps me to see that that applied to him too, because he was created, as far as we are concerned,
Right.
to bring us into relationship with God.
Mhm.
Because if he doesn't die, dude, we keep on keeping on.
Right.
No question in my mind. And it would be something else that God would have used to bring us into relationship with him.
Mhm.
So one thing going through my mind is like, okay, so I do believe in God. And recently we've been, returning to church and trying to build that relationship. That's just kind of like a preface to what I'm about to say. But what's going through my mind and what I'm sure is going through some of our listeners' mind at least is like, okay, so I know this isn't what you're saying, but oh, so like God chose for Luke to die so that way you could build a relationship with him. Um, can uh, I imagine I'm sure that's not what you're saying, but can you like walk us through that and help me kind of see it the way that you see it?
Yeah, that is actually exactly what I'm saying. I firmly believe that. And I'll tell you why, because I think that's probably the next question. Okay.
Mhm.
I firmly believe that because I believe that God is God. And what I mean by that is that he has authority that I don't have, and that he makes decisions that I do not understand
Mhm.
and may never actually understand. But, or maybe an and. Probably better is that it's an and. And in light of all of that, what I believe from what God has shown me as I have dug deep into reading the Bible cover to cover many different times and having an active prayer life
Mhm.
and seeking him and having real relationship. Because again, I'm trying to distinguish here between I knew all about him intellectually from 12 years of education
Mhm.
and wanted nothing to do with him. And now I have daily conversation with him. And what he has revealed to me, and I mean that with a little r, okay? I'm not saying I'm like, he's like revealing things like there should be another book of the Bible, okay?
Right, right.
But what I have come to understand about him in my experience and relationship with him is that his character is one of love. And so Luke, as far as I'm concerned, is living the dream in heaven.
Right. Yeah, he is.
And so Luke didn't miss out. It's just that it's going to be some elapsed period of time before we join him.
Mhm.
And
Yep.
if I got to pick it, I wouldn't have done it that way. I really wouldn't have. I wouldn't have given him up. But I didn't get to pick. And what I've seen is that God has loved me in all of it, and he's loved my wife, and he's loved our subsequent children, and he's loved the people that we've impacted as a result of that. And he still loves Luke.
Yeah.
Without question to me.
Right.
So it's not so much God choosing to bereave you and your wife of your firstborn as it is giving Luke his get out of jail free card early, is what you're saying.
Sure, buddy. That's good, man. That's pretty solid, Paul. That is pretty solid.
Yeah. I know it's so hard to kind of shift the perspective, but it's like if you do believe in heaven, then yeah, like he gets to go to enjoy the bodaciousness that is offered in heaven.
Exactly.
I don't know why that's the word that came to mind, but that's the word that came to mind. So I appreciate you sharing and walking me through that. And I know that that is something that many who deal with loss grapple with.
Absolutely.
And I think many of us conclude that, okay, that's just nature. Nature is like, there's no like mal or good intent. It's just nature. I think that's one common explanation. So, and I
Mhm.
think yours provides, while in some ways it may be harder pill to swallow, it also is an easier one because you're focused on what Luke is enjoying now. And he didn't have to go through the pain and suffering of this life.
Mhm.
But what would you say to those who are still grappling with, like, it's hard to see that. I'm just focused on like my loss. He's not here with us. Why
Mhm.
why can't we, you know, build those memories? Why can't I change his diaper? Why can't I get, diarrhea all over me? Why can't I hear his laugh and see his eyes? What would you say to those of us who are kind of struggling with that?
Yeah. Paul, that's a legit question, man. And I'm glad you asked it because people people wonder that. And it's a
Mhm.
great question to ask. And it's also a question that I highly encourage people to ask God if they are in the scenario that you're describing and believe. And we did. So we regularly asked him, why? Like, why did this happen? But we were asking it in a way that was more out of curiosity and a processing. It wasn't a shaking of our fists like, how dare you? You know what I mean? Hopefully Andrew, thank you for that. Like, I'm just trying to like draw that distinction. I'm not saying
Yeah.
one's better than the other. I'm just saying that's where we were coming from with that, you know? And I'm truly trying to answer the question here directly. And what was happening for us was that we were really dumping our heart out to God in prayer to process our grief. And this is like 1 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning, 4 o'clock in the morning. I mean, like awakened by the grief. And so as we asked those questions, as we were in some cases feeling debilitated by the grief, we just continued to get these waves of peace. And that helped us a lot. So what then kind of unfolded from that over time, okay? And you got to remember, just so that we're very clear, I'm now 14 years in on this, okay? So my understanding of all of this 14 days out is totally different than 14 months versus 14 years, right? But what unfolded over time was just more of this enveloping of God's love onto us, okay? And that's what helped us then to really understand that while we don't get this, and while we fully would not have picked this ourselves, He's got a bigger plan. He's got a better thing in mind. And then some things began to emerge. An example of that is that one that I haven't talked about thus far is that as we began to consider getting pregnant again, okay, we did a little bit of digging into what caused Luke to die. And there's nothing conclusive, but there was photographic evidence, like the pictures that we have of him, like right after he's born, of his cord being the wrong color, like not normal colors. Okay. And that helped our next obstetrician identify that my wife had a condition called MTHFR. And we still don't know what caused Luke's fetal demise. That's the technical term for it. But what it got us to was a point of understanding where we both, my wife and I, believe that there was a really good chance that it was blood clotting in his cord that caused him to die. So we then concluded, if that was the case, and we somehow know this early enough that he survives, there's a very good chance in our minds that we would have ended up with a special needs son, and we would have loved the crap out of him.
Yeah.
There is no doubt about that. I still do, man. I can't wait to hug that kid again, man. You know what I mean? I hugged him for 24 hours. But where I'm going with this is that we recognized then, and still do, but that was a mercy from God, that we did not have to go through that anguish, that neither did Luke. You know what I mean? And so I feel like, man, I'm not, Paul, answering your question. So, and I hate that. I really do. The thing that I then come back to more than anything beyond our individual experience is the fact that I just personally believe that God, has authority that I don't, and I'm not necessarily going to understand it. And I don't necessarily like that, but I have seen him love me regardless of whether or not I've understood things. And so I've grown more trust in him over the years to say he must have had something else in mind than what I thought. And that doesn't necessarily relieve the pain for the people that are experiencing it. And it took a long time for us to kind of get to that point.
Yeah.
But I've seen his character be one of love.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that. And, I think you did answer the question, and especially with the, ask God, like it's like kind of, talking to your spouse about something your friend did, and you're like, oh, you're like, he's just driving me up the wall, and like, because he never answers my text or whatever it is, this is all hypothetical.
Oh, yeah,
right,
you're
I'm
just
not.
Andrew?
talking about
I'm
me,
not.
aren't you?
I'm not insinuating about you, Andrew. And it's like, okay, have you told him about it? Have you talked to him about it? It's like, okay, it's like we're talking about like, oh, God is like bereaving us of our kids and left and right. It's like, oh, have you talked to him about it? So I think that is great advice, and I appreciate you kind of walking us through like how you went through that and how you dealt with it, and that it is a journey. And the last thing you just mentioned is, like it won't relieve your pain, your grief. And I think that's one of the, at least from my personal journey, and it sounds like yours as well. That's like one of the hardest things to come to grips with. That it's not so much like the pain getting better or like getting rid of the pain as like learning to live with the pain and to accept the goodness and joy that continues to exist and be presented in your life alongside it.
Yep, exactly. Let me add to that real quick because I think you're right on with that, man. I am not a scientist. You can take one look at me and know that. And that was a bad joke. I'm sorry. I thought I might get a chuckle from you guys, but I do know. Oh, now I set Andrew up, and
Yeah,
now he's like, "Oh, that actually was funny." No, I
it was more
do
the
though
commentary
know
after.
one thing from bio, and that is that moms are built with all of their eggs on board. And we all kind of know this, right? They come out at the frequency that they come out.
Mhm.
Most of the time, that's roughly once a month, right? And where I'm going with this long lead in is that I firmly believe that the egg that represents my daughter, who's born alive 18 months after Luke, okay? If Luke doesn't die and we're raising him, there's a really good chance we don't try to get pregnant 9 months later.
Hmm.
And that signals to me that that egg that is now my daughter would never have been born, and we would have never met her. And we might have had a different egg, you know what I mean? That was born as a girl, right? And I know that that's determined by the sperm. But my point is that we see those types of things, or we look at those types of things and we're like, and we even communicate that actually to our daughter.
Mhm.
They're like, look, this is how it works. And your name might have been given to somebody else, but God wanted you. And so do we. And we
Mhm.
are super grateful that you are who you are and that you came into our family when you did.
Right.
Yeah. 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 My wife and I feel the same way about Liam, who's turning 1 this month, and Isla, who we lost
Yeah.
almost 3 years ago. So it's a high chance he wouldn't be here. And similar, high chance my wife and I wouldn't be married or even know each other, or Andrew and I have the relationship that we do now,
Right.
or that this podcast even exists if my mom hadn't passed in 2014. And it's like,
Mhm.
same as you, is like every time I'm going to choose that my mom still be alive and that Isla still be alive, but these things wouldn't exist otherwise.
Right.
Yeah.
So it puts things into perspective.
You mentioned your sister just being that angel for you and not having to go through what you and Paul have had to go through, but, like being on the outside, a lot of us that are close to someone that's gone through that loss, it's like, well, what can I do? Because I love Paul. My younger brother's gone through. They had a miscarriage while he was actually deployed overseas, and you're just kind of left thinking like, what can I do? And then obviously your sister went to be there with you. This is kind of something Paul and I talked about when friends of ours experienced a loss as well, and because you reach out and like, oh, we're doing okay, and it's like, well, I'm here, but at the same time, like, what can us as uncles, aunts, or just friends, help to? Because in a way, we kind of have our own. Sorry about my dogs. Like experience of that loss too. Like that
Yeah.
Luke could have been my nephew. So it's not as great of a grief as what you as a parent are going through, but we want to participate and help you through that. It's just that's the big question. It's like, what can I do?
Yeah. It's a wonderful question, man, and I can definitely hear your heart in it. My major piece of advice is that presence matters.
Hmm.
So even though the grieving person is commonly going to say, we're okay, that type of thing, if you can, go and be with them. Don't jam your way through the door. You know what I mean? But a lot of times it's just a little bit of a defense mechanism because of their grieving. And they're like, I don't want to subject you to my slobbery tissues because I'm in the middle of a cry session, but like presence really matters. And then in that presence, you don't have to say much at all. But my suggestion is encouraging them to talk. So like with a miscarriage, it's a little bit different because in a lot of cases there's no like experience of holding the child, for example. But if there is an experience of holding a later term miscarriage or a full term stillbirth like what we had, or a child that dies at 4 days or something along those lines. The big thing that I have found, and I've used this in situations with folks that are grieving even the death of a spouse, okay, is I use this question. I'm really sorry about your loss. Tell me about it. Because nobody asks that. Just tell me about them. What were they like? And man, doesn't matter if they've been married 60 years. They'll tell you, doesn't matter if they held him for 6 minutes, him or her, they'll tell you. And just be present and ask, have them talk. Makes a big difference.
That's good advice. I like that. Now I know, and I hope I don't have to go through it again, but like, Paul mentioned,
same
it is part of life. Yeah, I tend to be more kind of like the helper type or the fixer. I guess all
Mhm.
men are. And you can't fix someone that's grieving. And so, yeah.
Yeah. Well, man, that's a great point. So to that end, as they are talking,
Mm-hmm.
just listen. Don't
Okay.
fix. I mean, we've had some people that they try to do sort of like the equivalency thing. Well, it's like, oh, well, at least it wasn't,
Right.
what and you're just like, dude,
You can still
knock
have
it off.
another kid.
You know what I mean?
Right,
Yeah,
yeah.
right, exactly. Yeah. And you're just like, it was really cool when you just came over and you just kind of hung out and you didn't say anything. You didn't
Right.
say too much. You know what I mean? Yeah. But good
Okay.
question, man. I can
Yeah,
definitely
no, I appreciate.
hear your heart in it.
Yeah, it's and maybe it's just because I am an uncle, but friends, a classmate of Paul and I's, they lost their baby right at birth. Mom had a rupture during delivery, and I can still they live down the road, and he was gonna call me to go over to his farmhouse to take care of the animals when they went to the hospital. So 5 a.m. the phone rang. They already had the name picked out, Florence. So I was like, is Figgy? That was her middle name was Irene, last name started with the G. So we were already calling her Figgy, and it's like she's here, and it was just dead silence on the phone. I'll never forget. It's painted in my mind, but just hearing the heartbreak. But at the same time, like what you were talking about, that he's a deep man of God as well, and it's like, and that's what he said. Is like she went home, and
Praise God.
yeah. And so, yeah, that's why I asked, because I was just left there wondering, like, what do I do now? Because this is a man that I've known longer than Paul, and lives 2 miles away from my house, and practically a brother to me. It's like, what do I do? So I
Yeah.
appreciate you, sharing from your side what I can do.
Yeah.
And Andrew, thank you for, kind of bringing that perspective too, because that's so many, even more of us can relate with that. I think knowing somebody who has gone through that loss and not knowing what to do, especially I feel like in today's society, loss and grief and all that is almost contagious. So appreciate you bringing that up. But yeah, Mick, thank you so much for walking us through this so much.
Very
I
much.
do want to kind of so following that journey, and we haven't even gotten to your living kids yet, but like before
Mhm.
we get there, like when we go through these big events, and especially when they're troubling and grief ridden like this, we men often handle it differently than our spouses, and that can oftentimes create conflict or tension or misunderstanding. So my question for you is, did you and your wife grieve differently? And if so, how, and how did you navigate that?
Yeah. Man, wonderful question. So for sure, we grieved differently. And I think this was really just by God's grace that we sort of knew that that was going to happen like right from the get-go. Because we weren't like, oh, let's download the best book on Kindle, you know what I mean, on
Right.
grief while we're sitting in the hospital room. So we quickly came to an agreement that we were going to let the other person grieve in their own way. And again, I don't know if this is a month out that we have that experience and kind of, get to that point. Maybe it's a week. It certainly isn't in the first couple of hours. And so there were days when I was having a good day and she wasn't. And it was just sitting with her, letting her cry it out, holding her hand, talking about it. I mean, we were blessed in the scenario that we didn't have other children, like we were hopeful for a busy household and we didn't have one.
Yeah.
So we had space in our lives to be able to do that. We recognized that other families like you guys, you have living kids and that's a much more challenging situation. And so then there were times when, of course, I'm having a terrible day and she's having a fine day. And we also came to the agreement somewhat early on as well that we were not going to use the language that Paul, you had actually said earlier, which is that we are not going to say to each other, move on. And we are not going to move on from this. Like, we're not going to dismiss this. We're going to get to a place where we believe that we can move forward.
Right.
But we are not going to move on and act like this didn't happen. And so it then just became a lot of giving each person the space to be able to do that in a loving way. Not like, oh, well, she's crying, I'll go to the garage. You know what I mean?
Right.
Not like that. But being present and letting them cry it out, because we would experience that stuff a little bit differently. Go ahead.
Yeah. I was going to say, were there ever instances where you're like, I just want to go to the garage? Because if you're having a good day, you want to keep having a good day, right? Like,
Right.
and then, okay, my wife, and this doesn't even have to do with grief per se, right? Right. But like, you're having a good day, your spouse is having a bad day. You just want to keep having a good day. Like, did you ever encounter that? And if so, like, how did you deal with that conflict?
Yeah, I can tell you honestly, dude, I didn't, just because I think my focus had so heavily shifted from me at that point that I'm like, I'm going to be here for her. And there were a lot of times that the grief was so exhausting, but it also felt good. And so, like, if I was on the tipping point of a good cry and I had still an okay day, and like she pushed me over the edge, I'm like, dude, let's get the tissue box. You know what I mean? Just like,
Right.
boom, it's coming out. And that is my encouragement, particularly to men, but not exclusively to men. Like, I mean, I prayed some raw prayers that had 4-letter words in it, okay? That I'm not suggesting I'm proud of, but I'm saying I dumped my heart out, and
Yeah.
that helped. And I did that over and over and over. And then there've been other times where I'm not grieving in the loss sense, right? But like, I had a business that failed many years on, like 4 or 5 years ago, and I had to hash it out with God. Right. So I'm not in any way trying to equate that loss to, the loss of a child. Right. But it was a loss. And I'm just like, Lord, what is the deal? Right. My point in all of this is I was just willing to be honest with
Right.
my spouse and with my creator. And the reason that I did that, just for anybody that is wondering, is I was like, he pretty much knows it anyway. Because it's all in my head and it's all in my heart. So I might as well actually be a man and say it to him.
Right.
And what I found is that he still handled me and he still loved me. And again, I'm not proud of all of that, but I can tell you for sure, I'd still love my kid if they mouthed off at me. I'd give him some discipline, you know what I mean? But I'm not going to stop loving my kid, I'm going to use it as an opportunity to coach him up, coach her up, show him some love, right? Give him some discipline, give him some guidance.
Yeah.
He's so much better than me as a dad, so.
Yeah. And I mean, the form of it may be one thing, but like the essence of it, communicating and processing your emotions, that's necessary. That's healthy. Like how you do it, like, with Evie, it's the same thing. It's like, yeah, so like you're upset. That is okay. Your body's trying to tell you something. Your mind, your heart is trying to tell you something. That part's okay. And it's okay to tell me about it. It's okay to communicate about it. The hitting, the name calling, that part, no. Like, we'll stop. But like, that is way better than just like, okay, like, nope, stop your crying, stop whatever, put a kibosh on it, and God, who is even more patient than I am, like, yeah, he's like, let it out, man. Let it out, Mick. I've been called way worse things, I'm sure.
Exactly.
Which I could probably tell Evie too, because her latest thing is like poopy butt and all those things. And I was like, I've been called way worse things. So, okay. So we talked a little bit about how you and your wife navigated this together. And as you mentioned, your daughter came 18 months later, and then 6 years after that, twin sons, right? How has losing Luke shaped the way that you parent your 3 living children?
Yeah, man. Well, it shaped it in probably more ways than I even know. So the first is it brought us into a position of legitimate gratitude for the birth of our daughter. Okay. Because I think I would have been over the moon being, the parent of a living son, but I don't think I would have appreciated it to the degree that I did when our daughter was born alive and subsequent children. So we enter then into this with a totally different perspective. Like, wow, this human being is a gift, not an assumed thing. And we were pretty close to the assumed thing before. I was like, remember I told you, like, just in the back of my head, we knew about my sister's stillbirth, you know what I mean? But like on the whole, everything kind of works out as you expect, So massively different. And then as a result of that, the hard stuff wasn't as hard because we weren't like, this sucks, or worse than that. You know what I mean? We're like, this sucks, but you know what's been worse for us? Having a dead kid. And that's the other thing. Like we were very clear with ourselves, like meaning my wife and I, that, and I respect the language that you have used. Like we decided we weren't going to say that we lost him. We were literally going to say we have a dead son. Our son is dead. We needed that in our process, right?
Right.
And so ultimately it was a parenting shift into one of gratitude, which made the hard a little less hard. All right. And also put us into a position there where we also felt like we now wanted to be the best possible parents that we could be to honor the gift of a living child. Okay. Because I think legit, guys, we would have said, and I'll certainly just speak for myself, I would have said, yeah, of course, I'm totally going to try and be the best parent that I can be for Luke.
Right.
But when you don't have any real perspective on that, and then you have like, whoa, I now actually don't get to parent Luke, and now I get to parent my daughter, total game changer. Like this really matters, right? I want to steward her because she's a gift. She's not just another kid, And then that's played out in our other additional children, like when we had our sons. That is a really unique and amazing story as well. But on the whole, it has put us into a position of gratitude and one where we're like, these children are a gift with a capital GIFT. Totally different than how we would have perceived them before. Because, I mean, Andrew, again, you're an uncle, you've been around children. Like Paul, you get it. You're a dad. Many dads are listening, right? Children can suck the life out of you.
Very much so.
Okay. Like we have to be honest about that. We love them deeply, but when you have a dead child, the living one sucking your life out, it is a little bit different.
Mm-hmm. It is. It absolutely is. That comment makes me think of this clip I saw with Andy Samberg where he's like, oh yeah, before you have a kid, everybody's like, oh, I'm so excited for you. Just wait until you hold him in your arms. It's going to be so amazing. And then as soon as you're holding the baby, they're like, welcome to hell,
Yeah.
But as you say, it comes with so much joy. I always say it comes with lower lows and higher highs, you know. But you said one thing that I don't want us to miss, and that is kind of your rephrasing of how you refer to Luke as we have a dead son instead of we lost him. Can you I think that there lies in there a powerful tool, reframing. Can you expound on that a little bit more? Because I think that could be something useful to others who are also navigating loss, similar loss,
Yeah.
or yeah, grief.
Freudian slip. Yeah, no, for us, it was a intentional reframe because we didn't want to sugarcoat it for ourselves. And we're like, this is already painful. This is brutal. Why would we make it 98 or 99% of the brutality, of the pain?
Hmm.
Why don't we just deal with, be in, fully experience 100% of it? Because we didn't lose him. We didn't misplace him. He's dead. And that's just where we got to. And we got to that pretty early on, and it ultimately for us ended up being somewhat of a healthy reframe,
Yeah.
And I can
Yeah.
actually distinctly remember having a conversation where we were kind of like, people aren't going to like that. That doesn't sound as good.
Right.
And we were kind of like, I don't really care. Both of us were like that. Like, our grief sucks. Like, we have to handle this ourselves,
Yeah.
So that's how we got there.
Yeah. No, thank you for sharing that. One more question, and then we can kind of go into a fun little segment that we use to wrap up. But how do you, so how do you carry Luke with you in your family culture today? Obviously, you hold him closely, you're sharing his story, and you're learning from it every day. But yeah, how does that translate to your family culture?
Yeah, man, wonderful question. So we have a couple of ways that we blend him in. The first of which is that we celebrate his birthday, January 5th, every year. So we honor him in that way. We'll usually grab a balloon or two because my kids are all still at that age where they're like, balloons, this is great. Typically we'll do cupcakes, and meaning like the kids will get their own cake for birthday, right? So we try and distinguish it a little bit. They're like, yeah, this is different. Okay. And we'll do blue icing on those cupcakes, right? Because he's a boy,
Right.
So we try and blend that type of stuff in, sing him happy birthday, that type of thing. And it's all upbeat, we're not doing presents or anything like that, but it's just, we're grateful. Happy birthday, When we pray, when we put our kids to bed, it's common, meaning probably at least once a week in our nightly prayers, that as we are thanking God, like I'm putting my sons to bed or I'm putting my daughter to bed, we're thanking God for those children that I'm holding their hand, right? Because the boys are twins, they sleep in the same bedroom. I'm in between their beds holding their hands, you know what I mean? And so I will be thanking God for my son, my daughter, their mom, and I'll regularly, not every single night, but regularly include Luke in that. Because what we have explained to our children to the age appropriate degrees, right? Because I got 12-year-old, almost 13, and then I've got 2 7-year-olds, is the impact that Luke has had on our lives, meaning mom and dad, and then the impact that's had on the other 3 of you, So we still acknowledge him in that sense so that they understand. Back to what we were talking about before as well, we regularly talk about Ephesians 2:10. It's like, hey, son 1, son 2, just like, I typically don't share their names, but you're created on purpose. Luke was created on purpose. So we just try and blend him in without making anything more of it than it kind of should be.
Yeah, no, I totally respect not sharing their names. It's calling them son 1 and son 2 is better than calling them thing 1 and thing 2,
Right.
Yeah. Although if we're a little frustrated with them, we will sometimes say that because they're identical. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's funny. Yeah, no, thank you for sharing with that, and what beautiful ways to honor him and keep him present in your life. I know every family finds their different ways, but I do believe that that is an important thing to do. But yeah, wow, what a great conversation we've had, and thank you for
Yes.
sharing yours and Luke's story with us. We've covered it all, like, your who you were before Luke, who you've kind of turned into, the actual journey, the actual grief, you and your wife going through it, you and your wife and your family finding God through it all,
Mhm.
and how that has turned into such intentional raising of your living children. So what a great testament, and also some really practical ways for those who are either going through grief or who know someone who's going through grief. So I really appreciate what you've shared with us. Before we wrap up, we like to do a fun little segment. We're still coming up with a name for it, but
Yeah.
we have a few quick questions.
Yeah.
Each one could be an episode in their own,
Exciting.
right? But just try to give us 1 to 2 sentences. If you feel inspired, we won't
We're
hold
not
you
gonna
to
be
those 1 or 2
exactly.
sentences. But yeah, just a few questions here. What does being a good dad look like to you?
Leading by example. So a super quick example of that is, how do I treat their mother with kindness, with respect, with gentleness? How do I carry myself consistently and the way I speak to anybody? The people that I talk to in the grocery store, like I abhor self-checkout. I want to talk to somebody, right? Gives me an opportunity with my children to see you can have a reasonable conversation with a total stranger. And then from a fitness standpoint, I make sure that my children see me exercising, because I want them to see. You guys probably heard the phrase like more is caught than taught.
Right.
I want them to catch it in addition to the teaching that I do.
Mhm.
Yeah. Um, not to overextend this, but I'm curious because I think that fitness piece is something that um, a lot of dads struggle with.
Mhm.
What does that look like for you currently?
Yeah, just for brevity's sake, right? Because like we could talk about this for a while. So all of my kids play soccer, and I am present at their soccer practices as I jog around the entire complex the whole time. I purposefully do not observe their practice from the sideline because I want them to be able to know dad's around if I really needed him, but I can handle myself with him not being right by my side. So I'm giving them space for independence,
Mhm.
and I'm at the same time demonstrating to them, hey, you're important. That's why I brought you here,
Right.
because this thing is important to you. But guess what? You're not the center of my life. And I have things that are important as well that benefit my physical health, my emotional health, and vis a vis you all too, including mom. So I
Mhm.
will use the entire practice. Some of them are 75 minutes, and I'll jog the entire time on purpose. That's just one example, right? We have weights in the garage. I'll invite the kids out to, hey, I'm going to go lift. You guys want to lift? Right. And at that point, it's like, we got to find the 5 pounders. Right. And
Right.
they're out there for 72 to like 112 seconds, but I've brought them in.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So there's some quick examples.
Yeah, I love that. I'm glad I asked the question. I am grateful that you answered them. Like I would not have thought of that soccer practice one, but what a great, two
Yeah.
birds with one stone, three birds with one stone, sort of situation there. Okay, next one. What is the number one habit that helps you show up as a dad?
I made the decision many years ago. Again, I talked about this before, but I made the decision to read my Bible every single today that the good Lord gave me. And I say it that way, guys, because I didn't set a goal. I just decided that if I wake up today, I'll read one chapter. And that is now many, many, many years deep. I've read through the Bible cover to cover. I do that 95% of the time in the morning before my kids are awake. And that's what allows me to start my day with the king, as opposed to me or kid chaos or work chaos or whatever it might be.
Right.
And that actually helps me show up to be a much better dad.
Love that. Giving me subtle, not so subtle reminders to get back into that practice. So I only have one question for you, Mick, and that's, after everything that life has put you through, um, what is one piece of advice you'd give to me as someone aspiring to be a dad that wants to be a dad? and then just make it in general to any guy in my situation.
Yeah, man, Andrew. What a great question, dude. Super wise of you to ask that. My one piece of advice would be to get mentors.
Okay.
And here's what I mean by that. I'll make this distinction quick. I think there's mentors with a capital M. These are guys that you have like a one-to-one type of relationship with.
Right.
And I'd suggest that it's someone who is further down the road that you want to go down.
Okay.
You look at some dude who's got an outstanding business, but he has a terrible home life and marriage.
Mm-hmm.
That may or may not be the person that they're further along in life, but they're not necessarily down the path you want.
Right.
So I'd find mentors with the capital M, meaning the one-to-ones. Okay. And then I think mentors with the lowercase m. And what I mean by this is surrounding yourself or putting yourself into groups with other people that can help to influence you just by the fact that you're all like, quote unquote, doing life together. So maybe it's a bunch of guys that are sort of a step ahead in life or 10 steps ahead in the path that you're interested in, right? That are all playing softball. I'm not saying this has to be, steak dinners and stuff like that, right? But like just because here's what I've experienced. I can overhear someone saying something and I'm like, they did that? Man, I never thought about that. That's a great idea. I could do that. And just by sheer osmosis, I am now being prodded, pushed, nudged to be a better person. And the other person wasn't even talking to me. That's what I call the mentoring with the little m.
Okay. I appreciate that.
Hell yeah. Yeah, I think that is advice that, many of us can take to heart because especially in today's day and age where isolation is a pandemic,
Very
especially
much
among
so.
men. And the loneliness and just like the lack that comes with it is so profound. And whereas on the contrary, as you alluded to, or you gave an example of, like, just by putting yourself out there, the abundance that comes from it is powerful. So thank you for
Yeah.
sharing that.
Thank you. Absolutely.
And Mick, thank you for your time and thank you for your extra time moving things
Yes.
around so we could give this episode its full due. Really appreciate that, and I know our listeners do too. And for our listeners, where can they find you?
Yeah. Well, all glory be to God for everything that we have discussed today. So I
Amen.
get no credit for any of this without question. But if anybody is interested in hearing more of my voice, God bless you if you want to do that. But whenyoulook.com is a great place to start as I host a podcast called When You Look. It's on YouTube, Spotify on video as well, and any place that you would get your podcast. So whenyoulook.com or at When You Look Show on any of the socials, including YouTube.
Excellent. Yeah, and we'll share those links in the show notes as well. And yeah, I think that this brings us to a wrap. Mick, thank you so much for your time. Listeners, be sure to check him out. Check out his podcast. Some
Yes.
really cool stories that he brings to light there. I know we didn't spend a lot of time on that. And we look forward to you tuning in next time. Thank you, Mick, and thank you, Andrew.
Thank you, Mick. Thank you, Paul. Thank you all.
Same to you guys. Really appreciate it. Cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers.